I never believed in grand romantic gestures until someone started leaving flowers on my porch every Monday morning. Not fancy bouquets from a florist, mind you. These were wildflowers, carefully arranged, tied with twine, sometimes with a single stem of lavender or a sprig of rosemary tucked in. No note, no explanation, just flowers, waiting for me when I opened my door at 6:30 in the morning to go for my run. The first time it happened, I thought maybe they were meant for my neighbor, Mrs. Chen. She's the type who actually knows people, who bakes cookies for the whole building. I'm the guy who nods politely in the hallway and pretends to check his phone. But the flowers were definitely on my doormat, not hers. I brought them inside, put them in a water glass because I didn't own a vase, and forgot about them. The second Monday, there they were again. Different flowers this time. Yellow wildflowers mixed with some kind of purple blooms I couldn't name. That's when I started paying attention. My name is Colin, and I'm what you'd call aggressively average. I work as a graphic designer for a marketing firm. I live alone in a decent apartment in Portland, and my social life consists of trivia night with co-workers every other Thursday and video calls with my sister in Chicago. I came out when I was 24, which felt late at the time but was apparently my timeline. I dated a few guys since then, nothing that stuck. I was fine with that. I'd convinced myself I was fine with that. The flowers kept coming. Week 3, week 4, week 5. I started looking forward to Mondays in a way I never had before. I'd wake up earlier than necessary, lie in bed, listening for footsteps outside my door. I never heard anything. Whoever was doing this was either very quiet or very lucky with their timing. I mentioned it to my co-worker, Rashida, during our coffee break. She grabbed my arm so hard I spilled my latte. Colin, someone is courting you. Like old school courting you. Do you know how romantic that is? Or creepy, I said, but I didn't really mean it. There was nothing creepy about it. The flowers felt like a question, gentle and patient, waiting for me to figure out the answer. Have you tried to catch them? She asked. Not really. Not really? Colin, it's been over a month. Aren't you curious? I was curious. I was so curious it was starting to keep me up at night. But there was something else too. Something I couldn't quite name. The mystery felt precious somehow. Once I knew who it was, everything would change. The anticipation would be over. I'd have to respond, have to figure out what to say, have to risk ruining whatever this delicate thing was. By week 7, I'd started researching the flowers. I bought a field guide to Pacific Northwest wildflowers and spent my evenings identifying them. Lupine, Indian paintbrush, columbine. Whoever was choosing these knew what they were doing. Each bouquet was thoughtfully composed, colors that complemented each other, textures that created interest. This wasn't someone grabbing whatever they found on the side of the road. This was intentional. I caught myself thinking about it at weird times. In the middle of designing a logo for a craft brewery, I'd wonder if Monday's flowers would include the white yarrow I'd seen growing in the park. During my morning runs, I started noticing flowers everywhere, imagining someone else noticing them too, thinking of me. It was week 9 when I realized I was hoping it was a specific person. His name was Everett, and he lived 2 floors down. I'd seen him around the building for months, but never really paid attention until I started playing this mental game of trying to figure out who my secret admirer might be. Everett had dark curly hair that always looked slightly messy, like he'd just run his hands through it. He wore glasses with thick black frames and had this way of smiling that made his whole face change. I'd seen him carrying art supplies once, a large portfolio case and a bag that clinked with what sounded like glass bottles. Paint, maybe. We'd had exactly 3 conversations. The first was in the elevator when he'd held the door for me and commented on the book I was carrying. The second was in the lobby when we'd both been checking our mail, and he'd made a joke about the number of takeout menus we got. The third was 2 weeks ago in the parking lot. I'd been loading groceries into my car, and he'd walked past, then stopped, and come back. "Hey, I'm Everett," he'd said, like we hadn't been living in the same building for months. "I know we've never properly met." "Colin," I'd said, juggling a bag of groceries to shake his hand. His grip was warm and firm. "I know," he'd said, then looked slightly embarrassed. "I mean, I've seen your name on the mailbox, not in a creepy way." "No, of course not," I'd said, even though my heart had started beating faster. We'd talked for maybe 5 minutes. He'd mentioned he was an illustrator, worked mostly from home. I'd told him about my job. He'd noticed my running shoes and asked if I ran in the mornings. I'd said yes, around 6:30 most days. He'd smiled that smile that transformed his face and said maybe he'd see me around. Now, standing in my apartment with Monday's flowers in my hands, a mix of orange poppies and blue bachelor buttons, I couldn't stop thinking about that conversation, about the way he'd looked slightly nervous, about how he'd specifically asked about my morning routine. "You're being ridiculous," I told myself out loud. Plenty of people in this building could be leaving flowers. But my brain kept circling back to Everett, the art supplies, the fact that these bouquets showed an artist's eye for composition, the way he'd seemed to already know my name. I decided to test my theory. Week 10, I left a note with the flowers. Just a simple, "Thank you. These make my Mondays better." I signed it with my apartment number, nothing more. Then I went for my run and tried not to obsess over it. That Thursday at trivia night, I was so distracted that Rashida finally threw a wadded-up napkin at me. "Okay, what's going on? You just let the entire table down on a question about 90s music. You never miss 90s music." I told her about my theory, about Everett. "So ask him," she said, like it was the simplest thing in the world. "What if I'm wrong?" "Then you're wrong." "But Colin, what if you're right?" She leaned forward, her voice gentler. "What if you're right and you waste all this time being too scared to find out?" That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what Rashida had said, about the flowers that had been showing up for 10 weeks now, about the care that went into each arrangement, about Everett's smile and the way my stomach flipped when I thought about him. I'd spent so much of my life being careful. Coming out had been careful, measured, announced to my family over email, because I couldn't handle doing it in person. My relationships had been careful too, always holding something back, never quite letting myself fall all the way. The flowers felt like the opposite of careful. They felt like someone being brave enough to put themselves out there week after week, not knowing if I even noticed, not knowing if I cared. Monday morning, week 11, I woke up at 5:30. I made coffee and sat by my front door like a complete lunatic, waiting. At 6:15, I heard footsteps in the hallway. Soft, deliberate footsteps that paused outside my door. My heart was hammering so hard, I thought whoever it was might hear it through the door. I counted to 10, then opened it. Everett was crouched down, setting a bouquet of pink wild roses and white daisies on my doormat. He looked up at me, his eyes wide behind his glasses, and froze. "Hi," I said, because my brain had apparently decided that was the full extent of my vocabulary. He stood up slowly, his face turning red. "I can explain." "You've been leaving me flowers," I said. It came out softer than I meant it to, almost wondering. "Yeah." He ran his hand through his hair, making it even messier. "I know it's probably weird. I kept seeing you in the mornings and you always looked so, I don't know, like you were carrying something heavy, and I thought maybe flowers would help." Then it became this thing I did, and I didn't know how to stop or how to tell you it was me without making it awkward. He was talking fast, the words tumbling out. I left them on Mondays because you mentioned once in the elevator that you hated Mondays, and I thought maybe I could make them less hateable. That sounds so stupid when I say it out loud. 11 weeks, I said. What? You've been doing this for 11 weeks. I picked up the bouquet he'd just set down. The roses smelled incredible. That's not stupid, Everett. That's probably the most thoughtful thing anyone's ever done for me. His expression shifted from embarrassed to hopeful. Yeah? I've been trying to figure out who it was for weeks. I kept hoping it was you. You did? I nodded. My hands were shaking slightly. I left you a note last week. Did you see it? I saw it. I've read it about 100 times. He pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket. My note. The edges soft from handling. I didn't know what to do. I thought about leaving a note back. But that felt like cheating somehow. Like I needed to actually talk to you. So talk to me, I said. We stood there in my doorway, and I watched him take a breath, gathering courage. I think you're beautiful, he said quietly. I've thought that since the first time I saw you. You were coming back from a run, and you had this look of complete peace on your face. And I thought, I want to know what that feels like. To be that comfortable in your own skin. Then I started noticing other things. The way you always hold the elevator for people, even when you're clearly in a hurry. How you're patient with Mrs. Chen when she tells her long stories in the lobby. You smile at people's dogs. You say thank you to the mail carrier. He paused. You seemed kind. And I wanted to do something kind for you. My throat felt tight. I'm not that interesting. You are to me. He looked down at his hands, then back up at me. I know this is probably too much. We barely know each other. But I couldn't stop thinking about you. And the flowers were the only way I knew how to say that without risking. I don't know, everything feeling too big too fast. What if I want it to feel big? I heard myself say. Everett's eyes widened. What? I've spent a long time playing it safe, I said. Being careful, not letting myself want things too much, because that way it hurts less when they don't work out. But these flowers, they've been the best part of my week for almost 3 months. You've been the best part of my week. And I think I'm tired of being careful. Colin, he said, and the way he said my name made my chest ache. Would you like to come in for coffee? I asked. I make terrible coffee, but I have good creamer, and we could talk more, if you want. He smiled, that transforming smile I'd been thinking about for weeks. I'd really like that. I stepped back to let him in, and as he walked past me, our shoulders brushed. It was the smallest touch, but I felt it everywhere. He smelled like paint and something green, like the stems of fresh flowers. My apartment was a mess. I hadn't expected company. There were sketches scattered on my desk from a project I'd been working on, dishes in the sink, and about 8 different water glasses with flowers in various stages of wilting spread across my kitchen counter. You kept them all, Everett said, stopping to look at the makeshift vases. Of course I kept them. Why wouldn't I? He touched one of the glasses gently, a bouquet from 3 weeks ago that had dried into something still beautiful. I didn't know if you even liked them. I thought maybe you just brought them inside to be polite. I loved them, I said. I bought a field guide. I've been identifying every flower you brought. He turned to look at me, and there was something vulnerable in his expression. Really? Really? The lupines were my favorite, I think, though last week's sunflowers were pretty incredible. I had to drive 40 minutes to find those sunflowers, he admitted. There's this farm that lets you pick your own. I wanted something bright. You'd seemed stressed the last time I saw you. How could you possibly know I was stressed? You were carrying your work bag differently, more tension in your shoulders, and you didn't smile at Mrs. Chen's dog. He said it matter-of-factly, like it was completely normal to notice these things about someone. I busied myself making coffee so he wouldn't see how much that affected me. That's very observant. I pay attention to things I care about. The coffee maker gurgled to life, and I leaned against the counter, looking at him. He was examining my apartment with genuine interest, taking in the framed prints on my walls, the books stacked on my coffee table, the running medals hung haphazardly on a hook by the door. "How long have you lived here?" he asked. "About 2 years. You?" "Year and a half. I can't believe we never really talked before." "We're talking now," I said. He met my eyes. "We are." I poured coffee into 2 mugs and handed him one. Our fingers brushed during the exchange, and neither of us pulled away immediately. "So you're an illustrator," I said, moving to sit on my couch. He followed, sitting close enough that I could feel the warmth of him. "Yeah, I do children's books mostly, some editorial work. It's not the most lucrative career, but I love it." "That's more important than lucrative," says the guy with the nice apartment and the fancy coffee maker. "This coffee maker was $15 at Target," I said, laughing. "And the apartment is nice because I spend all my time working and have nothing else to spend money on." "That sounds lonely." I looked down at my coffee. "Sometimes it is." "Me too," he said quietly. "That's part of why I started the flowers. I was lonely, and I saw you, and I thought, maybe if I do this, maybe it'll lead to something. A conversation, a connection. I don't know. It felt less scary than just knocking on your door. And now I'm sitting on your couch, drinking terrible coffee, and I'm more scared than I've ever been." He said it with a slight smile, but I could hear the truth in it. "Why scared?" "Because I really like you, Colin. I've liked you for months. And now this is real, and not just something I imagine while I'm arranging flowers at 5 in the morning. And real things can go wrong." I set my coffee down on the table and turned to face him fully. "They can also go right." "Is that what you want? For this to go right?" "Yes," I said, and it was the easiest thing I'd ever admitted. "I want to know everything about you. What your favorite book is. Why you became an illustrator. What you think about at 5 in the morning when you're arranging flowers for someone you barely know. I want to go on actual dates with you and hold your hand and see if this feeling I get when you smile at me is something that lasts or something that burns bright and fast. I want to try." Everett set his coffee down too. He reached over and took my hand, lacing our fingers together. His palm was slightly rough, probably from holding pencils and paintbrushes all day. "I think about you at 5 in the morning," he said. "I think about what flowers you might like, what colors would make you happy. I imagine you finding them and smiling. And that's enough to get me through the whole week. And my favorite book is The Little Prince, which is probably predictable for an illustrator, but I don't care. And I became an illustrator because my mum used to read to me every night, and the pictures were always my favorite part. I wanted to be the person who created that magic for someone else." "That's a good reason," I said. My voice came out rougher than I intended. "Colin," he said, and then he leaned in, slowly enough that I could stop him if I wanted to. I didn't want to. His lips met mine, soft and questioning, and I kissed him back with 11 weeks of wondering and wanting. He tasted like my terrible coffee and something sweet. And when he pulled back, his eyes were bright behind his glasses. I've been wanting to do that since week 3, he admitted. Week 3? What took you so long? He laughed, and the sound filled my apartment with something that felt like sunlight. Cowardice, mostly. Well, you're very brave now, I said, and kissed him again. We spent the rest of the morning on my couch, talking and kissing and learning each other. He told me about growing up in Vermont, about his family's flower farm, about how he'd learned to arrange flowers from his grandmother. I told him about Chicago, about my sister who called me every Sunday, about how I'd almost become an accountant before I realized I'd be miserable. I'm glad you didn't become an accountant, he said. Me too. Around noon, his stomach growled loudly and we both laughed. I should probably feed you, I said, or I could take you to lunch, a proper date. A proper date, I repeated, liking the sound of it, even though we've kind of been doing this backward. Especially because we've been doing this backward. He stood and pulled me up with him. I've been romancing you for 3 months. It's time I actually took you out. We went to a small cafe near the waterfront, the kind of place with mismatched chairs and local art on the walls. Everett ordered a sandwich with about 17 ingredients, and I got soup, and we sat by the window watching people walk by. Is this weird? I asked. How fast this feels. It doesn't feel fast to me, he said. I've been falling for you in slow motion for months. This feels like everything finally catching up. That's a very romantic thing to say. I'm a very romantic person. You're going to have to get used to that. I think I can manage, I said, and under the table, I hooked my ankle around his. We stayed at the cafe until they started giving us looks about taking up a table, then walked along the waterfront for hours. Everett pointed out flowers in the parks and told me their names, their meanings in the old Victorian language of flowers. Red roses for love, obviously. Daisies for innocence. Lavender for devotion. What did the first flowers mean? I asked. The ones you left. Yellow wildflowers and purple asters. Yellow for friendship and happiness. Purple for enchantment. I was hedging my bets. Smart man. Not that smart. It took me 11 weeks to actually talk to you. Well, I'm not that smart either. It took me 11 weeks to catch you. He stopped walking and pulled me close, right there on the path with joggers and cyclists going past. You caught me a long time ago, he said. You just didn't know it yet. That night he left reluctantly, with promises to see me again soon. I walked him down to his apartment. And at his door, he kissed me goodnight like we were in some old movie, sweet and lingering. Same time tomorrow? He asked. You're not going to leave flowers on my doorstep anymore. Would you like me to? I thought about it. Maybe sometimes, but I think I'd rather you just knock on my door. I can do that, he said, smiling. The next morning, I woke up to a soft knock at 6:30. When I opened the door, Everett was standing there with 2 coffees from the good cafe down the street and a single stem of lavender tucked behind his ear. Good morning, he said. Want to go for a run with me? I should warn you, I'm very slow. I don't mind slow, I said, and I meant it in more ways than one. We've been together for 8 months now. He still leaves me flowers sometimes, though now they're usually accompanied by him, standing in my kitchen, arranging them properly in the vase we bought together. His art supplies have migrated to my apartment bit by bit, and most nights he falls asleep on my couch while I work late on designs, his sketchbook open on his chest. Last Monday I woke up to find a bouquet on my nightstand. Red roses, white daisies, and purple asters. Love, innocence, and enchantment. Everett was still asleep next to me, his curly hair spread across the pillow, one hand reaching toward my side of the bed even in sleep. I don't hate Mondays anymore, I don't think I could ever hate anything that brought me this.